Atari just reinvented the video game.
Atari UNLIMITED. Atari UNLIMITED. Atari UNLIMITED.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Atari Unlimited. Woo! I'm your good buddy, your good pal, Amigo Aaron, joined as always by Atari aficionado, the Brent.
Hello.
And this week, the Brent, I'm excited for what the committee has chosen for us to take a look at this week, because we're going to be diving into a system that I didn't know anything about really before this week, the Atari 130XE system.
And do you think it's odd that the committee has continuously brought us failure after failure from Atari?
Well, see, that's...
Not to show our hand a little bit.
Well, I'm not going to look at it now. I don't consider the system a failure per se.
Okay.
But I mean, I think I can make a case for this machine to a certain degree. I mean, the machine itself, there's nothing wrong with it. If you just want to get right into it, since we're talking about the one, let's just get into it right away.
All right.
Because I got some information to go over. So, to make this information make any sense, all right, I want to start off. We're going to get everyone in alignment with dates. Okay. So, when you talk about the Atari 8-bit line, Brent, do you know when the 8-bit line kicked off? And you don't have to be, you just close.
Like 82?
Wrong. Incredibly wrong. The very first Atari 8-bit machine was all the way back in around 79.
You're counting console.
No.
There was an 8-bit computer from Atari
Yes,
back in
absolutely.
79?
And this is, you're making my point for me here.
Wow.
It was released in small, there was a release in 78. It was worked on in 77. The full nationwide release was 78. And this, you're talking the 400, 800 series of Atari 8-bit computers.
Wow.
Okay, now.
Honestly, I would have never thought
And look
that
at
far back.
look at the chat room. Like everyone in here, you can tell these guys did their homework. So I want to, and I'm bringing this up for a reason. Okay, you had the Atari 400, 800, and then you had the 1200 XL, the 600 XL, the 800 XL. Okay, this leads you all the way in. That was released around 83.
Yeah.
All right. Then you had the computer we're going to talk about today, which is the 130XE. Then you had the 65XE, released basically at the same time.
Yeah, that was almost...
Then you had a computer that you didn't know, not many people saw, with the 800XE. And then lastly, I'm going to throw the Zegs in there, the XEGS, which was their game console. But if you put a computer keyboard attachment on it, it was a computer. I've got one. And it's the same as anything else.
Yeah,
Okay.
It is, but I mean,
so now
I don't know if I'd put that in the computer line.
It is. It's a computer.
I understand.
Okay,
I understand.
so I mean, if you have the keyboard. So I want to make this clear. So from 79, this is this 8-bit line. These were, I mean, for the most part, these were backwards compatible from 79 all the way up to where they discontinued the 800XE in 92.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're talking, that was at 13 years.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
Noble but horrible business
You
practice.
notice that the 130XE came out in right around 85. Okay, so what does that mean? That means you'd already ridden the 8-bit pony chipset for a good while at that point, but things moved slower in those days.
That's true.
All right, so it was okay. Now,
not that slow, but I understand.
To put stuff in perspective, in 1976, okay, to keep this in mind, this is important. It's overlooked by a lot of people. In 86, Warner Communications bought Atari from Nolan Bushnell. Okay, in 76.
Yeah.
Okay. In 78, when they announced the personal computers, they would all be using the 6502. And then in 79, they started shipping these computers, okay? So, that you've got that. Now, flash forward to 85. So, in July of 84, Tramiel Technology, you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
You know, Angry Jack and his crew. They bought the consumer division of Atari from Warner Communications, okay? Because Warner had a rough time since the crash of '83 in America. Now, keeping in mind, because I know our European viewers and listeners are sensitive to this, we know you weren't affected. Over here, it was a real thing.
Yeah, we definitely saw
and it devastated Atari.
Yeah.
Atari got hammered.
They were by far the worst hit.
Right. So keep in mind that now we're in '85 and Trammell is running Atari. Okay? And so things changed up a bit because, Jack had a certain philosophy on how he did stuff. So the one, well, he did. I'm just saying. The 130 XE was first shown at the Winter Las Vegas Consumer Electronics Show in '85. I do miss these shows, by the way. It debuted at the same show as the Atari 130 ST. Okay? So you're thinking to yourself, why would you debut another in a line of these 8-bit machines at the show that you're debuting the ST? All right, we all know about the Atari ST. So he did this for a reason.
Sink the company?
This was effectively the Atari ST was your Commodore 64 basically, and your 130 was sort of like the VIC. You could have, if you can't afford the newest toy, we can give you something that's sort of new, right? You can tell by looking at one of these machines because it has the same form factor color as an ST. Okay?
Yes.
If you look at it, it looks very similar. I didn't know this. Do you know what XE stands for?
Extra?
It stands
Extended memory?
It stands for XL compatible 8-bit. That's what it stands for. I'd never heard that. So that's, if you ever wonder where that came from, and the 60, so you had the 65 XE and the 130 XE. That was because of the memory. 65K in the XE, 130K, which are really 128K. Yeah. I didn't know that either, because it doesn't. You don't think in terms of that memory-wise. So that was something I didn't know. So the XE, the 65 was announced at the same show as well. The 65 is pretty much the same as the 130 with a few exceptions, but one of the main exceptions is it has half the memory. All right, and so so you've got a difference. So there's some port differences as well. You're asking, the Atari 800 XL was a very popular 8-bit machine, arguably the most popular Atari 8-bit machine. I tried to find numbers on how these things sold. Don't know. Who knows? I don't know. But I would say the XL was a popular machine. So when the XE series came in, they made a few changes, but not that many. For the most part, they kept most stuff the same. But they did get rid of the parallel bus interface on the back of the XE computer, or the XL computers, and replaced it with something called the Enhanced Cartridge Interface. Okay? So
it's one of those ports that does it all, isn't it?
Well, it's a port that really didn't do much, because
that's exactly what I said.
Let's get into the actual machine itself, and then we'll talk about the ports in it. So, if you've never seen a 130 XE, again, it's got that Atari aesthetic from the ST with that kind of cream-colored box
case. Yeah.
The buttons have that diagonal slant.
Well, the function button.
Yeah, the function buttons. The keyboard. Now, I have heard the keyboard that was on this thing is similar to the one that I've got for the XEGS, and it's got a bad rep. And if it's similar, I can understand why, because the one for the XEGS is mushy as hell.
It's a gooey keyboard.
And what they did was, these are the bubble over membrane keyboards, okay? So they're not that good. In fact, they're renowned for being, listen, it's better than the Specky, but not much. On the right-hand side of the machine, you had two of the patented Atari joystick ports.
Yep.
Now, here's where Atari did some odd stuff. So on the back of the machine, you've got the port that you plug in your floppies and it's sort of like basically the Atari's version of a USB port.
Yeah.
It's a multi-use port. You put cassette decks in it and whatnot. Also in the back, they also put the cartridge slot on the very back. All right, and we'll get to that. And then right beside the cartridge slot is that new slot. Okay, now.
And something to note about these two slots is they're not divided. I mean,
they are.
You have a cartridge slot.
You could have made a device that fit both,
and then
sorta.
a small empty part of space, and then that other serial type slot.
I assume that maybe they thought someone would make a mega thing to stick in there, but as far as I know,
right. But the reason why I'm mentioning that is for later when we talk about why it being on the back is stupid.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty much. We'll get to that. So, the cartridge slots for cartridges, duh. All right. This thing was pretty much compatible with the entire line of cartridges.
Yes.
All right.
Which again is noble but stupid.
Well, no, there were a ton of good cards.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to advance your technology.
So the ECI port, I looked all over to see what went in that, and so what I found, and this is having not had this computer, I wasn't that familiar with this slot. Most of what goes into that slot are like drive controlling type stuff, like SCSI drives, that sort of thing. It wasn't really, apparently there wasn't a lot of action on it back in the day. Certainly your average consumer would probably have never used that.
Right, because your disk drives and your tape drives and stuff went into the other port, correct?
Right, correct.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, in many, many, many places, this shipped with a tape drive.
Well, the tape drive, so as with the Atari, it's not like the Coke where we could just plug in any tape drive with a Spectrum. The Atari had their own drives, right? They eventually released a drive that was actually made for this series, the XE series. It looks nice, but I mean, it's these tape drives I see cheap now, not the XE ones, but the old ones.
Unfortunately, it still suffers from the Atari curse of being slow and error prone.
Yeah, well, yes, and I mean
because that's all on the software side.
It's funny because loading stuff off the tape on the Atari was not something I did all that much. Now the neighbors would do it, but often, you're right. Sometimes it was just like anything else. The Coco, I think, had the best tape drive. It failed the least for me, but I mean, there you go. Anyway, you've also got RF on the back. You've got a video out on the back. I mean, it's a RGB type plug that's on the back of it as well. So and then you have
your power switch
and a power switch, and then there was nothing on the other side. So.
Or the front.
Right. So here we are. It's 85. Now let's talk about the cartridge slot before we get into the good things this thing had. This thing placed the cartridge slot in the very back, which is something that the XL, for example, didn't do. The XEGS didn't even do that. And so people hate this.
Yes.
In fact, I saw a guy you could go to PCBWay and get a gimmick that plugs in. It's sort of like an L. So you can plug, at least you can see the top of your cartridge.
Go down.
It's real hard to plug these things in, from what I read.
Well, this is why I brought up the second port. Is if you just had a cutout, right, that was cartridge size, you could at least feel that. But that isn't the way this is set up.
Yeah.
The back where the cartridge plugs in is huge because there's two ports in the same area.
Yes, and it makes it more difficult.
So you're feeling around, and you can feel both ports with the cartridge when you're trying to stick it in.
Because this certainly isn't the first machine that had a cartridge port
it's
on the
not,
back.
but really
everyone
bad
hates cartridge ports on the back. Now,
especially since the cartridge port on this could have came up through the top of the machine.
Well, maybe. I mean, who knows?
Could've.
So the reasoning behind this, and I've never read this as an official statement from Atari, was by 85, cartridges were seen as passe. And they assumed that most people would be moving on to floppy drives, which they also eventually made two drives that fit the same sort of physical look of the machine. I believe they had a 5 1/4 inch, and I think they had a 3 1/2 inch as well.
They did.
There can't be too many of those knocking around
I can't
out
imagine
there. So what made the Atari 130XE different? Well, so the Atari 130XE was the only computer in the entire Atari 8-bit line to offer 128K memory. Okay,
Out of the box.
Right, out of the box. It also had a Freddy chip, but basically it let you operate RAM independently, banks independently. Now we're leaving my realm here, but this is what it was there. And of course, it did have the ECI. And the joystick ports weren't in the worst spot, which that's also occasionally. Sometimes I'll put them in the back. The ones on the XEGS are diagonally under the machine, which they probably thought was a good idea, but was actually a very dumb idea.
Yeah.
So at least, the cartridge slot's easier to get to, but the joysticks are easier to get to on the one.
Joysticks you plug in once and forget about it for the most part.
Right. And again, having released the same time as the 65XE, and we sort of have to talk about these in tandem a little bit. We may cover the XE by itself someday, but the XE, again, didn't have the memory, and it was also missing the expansion port in the back.
Yeah.
So, which is not a huge deal, right? So let's talk about what you did with this machine. Okay, so you notice I'm not going deeply into the deep. I guess I'll give you a little bit of technical information, but if you've seen one Atari 8-bit, you've seen a lot of them.
And that's
this had the 6502C, just like the other. This was a 1.79 megahertz machine in America. It had 24K ROM, it had basic 8K basic on it. This, and of course, it always came with the same wacky Atari self-test stuff on the ROM and all that stuff. Had the Pokey chip, a 4-voice Pokey chip, which was more than adequate. It had 16 graphics modes with a maximum of 320 by 192 pixels, which that's pretty
Standard
good.
crap.
And an external power supply, as you can imagine. And the keyboard was just like, they all have sort of the same keys. They sort of all have to. They're not always in the same spot, but they pretty much have to have the big crooked Atari keys at the top, for like help and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's all your function keys.
Yeah. So
now wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
You forgot the best reason of why to own one of these machines.
Okay, I didn't forget. I'm not done, but go ahead.
It has the most awesome looking joystick of any Atari system.
Well, it does. They did come with and this was an XE line joystick that was cream colored at the bottom but black at the stick.
It was cream color base, black stick, orange button, and it looks freaking awesome.
Here's my theory on these joysticks, because I've seen them around.
Yeah, they're awesome.
They're your standard Atari stick,
They are.
by the way.
Yes, 100%.
I think Atari, if I know Jack Trammell, I think they had sprung for the cream colored bases, and he just had a bunch of those rubber sticks. I was like, listen, stick them on there.
They probably had tons of those beads left over because they didn't make nearly enough cases.
Yeah.
And just stuck them into the other machine.
There's no telling who Jack held up and didn't pay to get those joysticks made.
But they are awesome.
And I will say, I don't have one of these for my XEGS, but because I don't care that much. But they are interesting looking.
They're awesome.
That's for sure. So we've talked about how long the Atari line was around. We've talked about the advantages that the 130 XE had over the other machines.
Cool stick.
No, the extra memory is a thing. So,
well,
my job, I was like, okay, let's look around, because again, you're outside of my element on this one. Let's look around and see what people did from a game perspective with this extra memory.
Sure.
Okay, and I looked around all over the place, and what I came up with was they didn't do much in the day. And it goes back to the same old standard, is that if you've got a computer with extra specs, but the majority of the computers don't have the extra specs, people tend to not use the extra specs. I will say
you don't program a game for 98% of the systems.
Yeah.
Or you do program for 98% of the systems, not 2% of the systems.
It's funny, coming from the Amiga, it's probably the only machine ever that used that was an upgraded RAM upgrade. They sort of insisted on for a lot of the games. Like most other machines weren't like that.
Yeah.
And so like even if you look like the Specky, maybe they'd add music in for like the 128K, but there were games there were way more games made for the extra memory on the Specky.
Yes.
And by way more, I mean some. Because I couldn't find any games from back in the day. I heard a lot of speculation that I couldn't find anything that was made contemporaneously with this machine that required the extra memory.
Yeah.
Okay, now there may have been some I'm not saying none existed. There may have been some PD games, maybe something I didn't find in my research, but I did find games that would use the extra memory to decrease load times, for example, or add in some extra flair to the game, like some voices or some extra music or something like that. But all these games that I found would still work on the 64K version.
From what I understand, was there were 4 or 5 games, Bosconian, a Battle Zone, Battle Zone, a Commando, and a handful of others that
Commando was never released. For
right.
The
None of these were released. None of them were released. But they were there and they were ready to go, but they never happened.
So, if you looked at the thumbnail for this, you're probably thinking to yourself, why is this called Atari's Missed Opportunity? Well, I'll tell you why. I was like, what are we going to talk about in this episode in terms of the 130XE? Because really, with the exception of the memory and the expansion port, there's not a lot that sets us aside from the majority of the 8-bits. Well, the built-in memory is a thing. And I thought to myself, maybe I can find a game, that a modern game, a homebrew game that takes advantage of this memory. And it didn't take me long to find one. And once I played it, I thought to myself, if they had manufactured games to the specification of this game, you could have kept right on trucking with this machine, because this game will hold. I mean, if you had this game in, say, 85, 86, you'd be good to go for a while. I think it proves that the extra memory was there. Now, the game we're going to talk about will work on any Atari 8-bit that has at least 128K.
Which would have been true for pretty much any game that they put out for the system.
Right, but I mean, this one requires the 128.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
It was made basically from the ground up for the 130XE, but it wasn't, it's not only on the 130XE. Right. The game we are going to look at was the homebrew version of an all-time classic, Brent, and it's called the Prince of Persia. Now, I'm assuming most people know what this is. I mean, we can do the Cliff Notes version of what it is. Just for fun, do you remember the first time you played this and what system it was on?
I do not.
Really?
No, because it would have probably been... Probably would have been Amiga.
Yeah, we did have it. So, if you wonder, this was a very late release. It's funny when you think about this, because I never thought about it, because the time kind of blends together. Seriously. But according to the wiki here, this debuted on the Apple II, which I knew, in October 3rd of 1989. 89. Would you have guessed that in a million years?
No.
I would never have guessed it. I thought it was way before that.
I thought it was 84,
so,
85.
It was on the Apple II, and I mean, this got ported to a lot of machines in the day. It was
everything.
It was a runaway hit.
It got ported to everything, whether it should have been or not.
Now, the man behind this was a fellow named Jordan Mechner, a very famous games programmer. He got his early fame came from a game called Karateka, which was on the Ataris, and this was his magnum opus, if you will. This was the big dog where he used the rotoscoping and all that jive. People have heard the story. He digitized his karate instructor. He digitized his brother, his dad,
and he translated those into animations. And he did it for the smoothness. It was, and it you could tell. You could tell it was not a robotic movement.
When you first saw this, had you seen anything that was in? I mean, I don't know what. Did you see this around when it debuted?
Well, like I said, I would have seen it when you had your Amiga, and it didn't really say to me, "Wow, these are great graphics."
Yeah.
But even back then, it did say to me, "This is great animation."
Yeah, it stood out.
Yes.
And Karateka was very similar. I loved Karateka, but the Karateka was almost like a tech demo for what this was.
Yeah.
Like, this was a fully fleshed out game, and it was good. This got ported everywhere, and then something sort of miraculous happened. of course, this game had achieved the status of legendary game. And then what happened was Jordan Mechner, being a cool guy, he documented all of his work on these two games. He's got notes, and I've got one of his books in the house that he wrote. But Jordan Mechner, a few years back, decided to release all the source code from the original Apple II version of the game, and which people had been clamoring for. So what this did was this opened up the ability to go in out there and screw with this stuff.
Yep.
He put it all of his stuff on a GitHub, and he let anyone that wanted to mess with it. And he would even offer to help people out technically. So you saw a ton of unofficial ports for this thing. You know, everything from the ZX Spectrum, you know, the C64, the BBC Master, a ton of stuff. Look, the VIC-20. I mean, so this got ported. If you think about the Apple and its specs. It's Apple. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Apple was a heck of a machine back to the Apple II, but this moving up, a lot of stuff can handle that sort of action.
Yes,
you know,
I agree.
at the varying degrees of success. And so, this fellow here decided to give this thing a whirl on the Atari. This was released in 2021. I looked in the forums when this got introduced. The Atari Age forums, and so this guy documented the entire game, building it from the ground up. So it was actually quite interesting to watch. This was published and developed by a guy named Ren Soup with 2 P's. Ren Soup. Also, get this. This is as timely as today's headlines. Ren Soup just finished, that's not true. He's in the process of converting over Elite to Atari from the BBC tape release. So right now, there's been a beta release this very year. I remember hearing about this, so I looked into it. So maybe one of these days we'll end up having to look at that. But Elite's a pretty awesome,
cool.
pretty awesome game. He had help on this, of course. He had graphical artist K. Giamaulidius, who really his only other credit on the Atari is this game called The Lady. I don't know much about that for 2020. He had people helping him with the sound. A guy named Vin Samuel, who did a game called Block Attack and Raymaze 2000. And then Michael Zablowski, who just has done tons of these modern, so many I didn't even list them, just tons of modern Atari 8-bits. So this guy's a real handy-dandy guy. And then he also thanked Fasui, Mr. Robot, Phil Son, and all the members of the Atari Ages forums for helping him play test the game. And so the port of this game is based on the BBC Master port. Now, we had a BBC Master at Boat Fest a couple years ago. In fact, our own buddy who's in the chair now, Josh Malone, brought it. The BBC Master was impressive.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of this thing. And so I thought to myself, man, this is a heck of a machine. So bringing this over for the BBC Master, great, because the BBC Master is very capable. So I think they chose correctly there. It's also based on they used all the original code for the Apple II, as I mentioned. And the background graphics also come from the BBC port. So all this stuff, the Atari port of this basically was ported from another port, effectively. The BBC port of this game. Brent, you hadn't played this until I introduced you to it this week. What were your first impressions?
Right off the bat, after you get through all of the intro splash screens from the creator, the first intro actual screen, the title screen, was beautiful. Like, it used way more colors and stuff, and I thought, man, this is very capable.
That was created by Sparkler, by the way, in case you're wondering.
If it's showing this much color and vibrance and detail, this has potential. And then you get your opening screen with the princess.
Don't forget about the demo. I want to hear you talk about that part at the very, very beginning.
No, that's why I said I'd skip all that.
There's a spinning guitar. No, it's cool.
It is
it's
cool.
It's done by the creators. He said it was something that was from like back in the old days that he'd ported forward. I love that. I like that. It was nice.
Yeah, but
come on, a good tune as well.
So you actually have your intro cutscene with the princess and the sultan and the whole bedchamber scene. and then you get into the game proper. And I was thinking, this looks so good, it has to run bad.
Yeah.
And I picked it up and I started playing with it, and it's very fluid. The controls are very precise. Most everything that I remember from playing Prince of Persia was there. At no point did I say, this is a watered down version of the game to fit on the system that they're putting it on. My only thoughts were, this is a heck of a job to get Prince of Persia onto a machine and run this well and look this good.
This has all the levels. It's complete for all intents and purposes. Plus, he says he programmed in a surprise, which I haven't seen the surprise yet. But I will say, amongst the things that are in the game, just before you actually play the game proper, there's a menu screen where you can change the color of your guy's vest.
Yeah.
You can fiddle around with the various tunes. You can also, it's got a level select, but it was grayed out for me, so I don't know if that has, it's yet to be implemented or you have to earn it.
Well, no, I think you have to get there before you can unlock it.
I played most of my days on Prince of Persia was on the Amiga version. Now, don't get me wrong, Amiga version runs fine. Amiga version has great sound effects, okay? But the Amiga version is very generic looking. And
there's no soul.
So when this thing loads up, like this guy's wearing the turban, he's wearing in the Amiga version, he's just like a guy in a white outfit. Like this guy looks cooler, and the dungeon looks way better.
Yeah.
In terms of obviously it's running at a lower resolution, but in terms of the what's shown to you, the display, I couldn't believe how nice it looked.
Yeah.
It reminded me of some of the more forward versions of the game that you'd see on like the Genesis, something like that, where it's like the Genesis version's super gaudy.
Yeah.
It's insane. But like this was like they had a real nice, it had an excellent flair. I like the way all the stones look and stuff. The important thing about a game like this, though, it looks nice, and it seems to run at a good clip. But how are the controls? Because Prince of Persia, if the controls are off, you're boned.
It's over.
What did you think of the controls on this?
All the controls are there. Your little careful step-ups, all that work the way they're supposed to, where if there is an edge, he won't just keep walking off.
Yeah.
The sword play felt correct.
Yeah.
Even though I died a lot because it's been a long time, the health is not just little chevrons. It's actually like little globes of health.
Yeah, that's nice.
I like that. Was a nice touch. The game feels good. It feels good. I think the only issue I had control-wise is the sprinting when you actually start to do your sprint. I feel like it was a little quick. I feel like he took off a little quick, which made me die a couple times. But that's more of an adjustment to get it in my mind that it's right, rather than it being wrong.
This game, this is me playing. If you're watching at home, I went through and tried to die as many different ways as I could because I was testing.
Oh, try.
I was testing some stuff. And now, come on, I walked up and just let a guy cut me. So that's what happened.
I think you do that in real life.
I've played this. This is one of my
Give me a
favorite.
knife.
This is one of my favorite games for real. And I've played this game so much that I've got it in my head. I know the Amiga version pretty well. And so playing this, I was prepared to poo-poo. Let's just put it that way. But I mean, right out of the gate, they nailed it. Cool opening scene. I like the demo-y stuff too. Cool picture at the beginning. The full intro, which is great. They did a great job. I think they may have augmented the princess's chest a tad. I will say that. I should mention that. But they nailed that part. And the cutscenes come in between every couple rounds. You get the cutscene, including the mouse, the whole 9 yards. I mean, nothing's been left out. The music is good.
Well, now that's one thing I will have to say. I don't think the sound effects in this are as good and feel as good as the visuals.
The sound effects aren't as good as the Amiga ones. That's one place. Of course, it's the Amiga. All right.
I know. I know.
It's sampling. The sound effects in this are good, and the music in this is very good. The Pokies are more than capable of taking care of this sound, and they kept the same cool tunes. I believe Mechner's dad did the music for this originally, if I'm not mistaken. And so he had a real good ear. And I mean, the tunes kept coming at the right time.
They do.
And they sound properly sinister sometimes when they come on, and there's a nice little fanfare when you win a sword fight or whatever. The first thing I did was start checking out the secrets, the secret areas you could get into, and they all were there. Everything was where I expected it to be.
I have no doubt all the level stuff's there.
I played this up through level 3, and I had no problems. In fact, the controls on this, I don't know if it's something that just feels different to me, but like stopping and starting and sprinting felt better on this for me than most machines.
Yeah, no,
It had a real good feeling, and I had no problems. The sword fight, like you said, the sword fighting in this game is great. Like, I don't know why after this, sometimes they didn't get the sword fight right, because do it this way.
Well,
you have a proper sword fight. It's cool.
There are game types, directions that this sword fighting wouldn't work in.
Well, I'm talking of
this
this type of game.
Yeah, but for this game, it definitely does work. I agree.
So, in case you want to run this, so here, I mentioned that you have to have a 128K of memory. Now, you can get that through, of course, the 130XE has it. But if you've got a Rambo or any of these RAM editions, it should work. And he also has updated to where it does work in PAL or NTSC. It should work. I know when I downloaded this, there was a whole slew of versions and disc versions for carts and stuff. I ended up using the big disc version, so I just loaded off one disc. Worked totally fine for me. I didn't have any trouble. I didn't have anything. I mean, it was a real tight number. Did you run into any sort of bugs or anything when you were playing it?
No, it was. I mean, I can't imagine it being any easier or smoother.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the 130 as for the computer, the Atari 130XE. I'm not going to sit here and say it's any different than anything else. It's got extra memory and a weird expansion slot and a bad keyboard. Okay, if it's me, I stick to the 800XL. Okay, that's your money, in my opinion, because the keyboard on that, and it's not the best, but it's better. Now, the 130 does have. I have seen people put mechanical keyboards in these. If you want to do the deal, it can take them, and it looks good. But you'll have a better keyboard, but I don't think you're going to get a better experience. This is one of those 8-bit Ataris. If you have it, you're good to go.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, but you have something else, there's probably no real big reason to run out and get it. Unless you're going to do something with that expansion port that is unusual. Like if you need something kind of SCSI interface, something like that, you're going to plug in there.
And that's something that you're doing yourself, because God knows they didn't make anything.
People sell these stuff now. Modern.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you've got, as you look at these Ataris, you can't look at them from the viewpoint of 2025, and so there may be special cartridges or additional implements you want to use, in which case that would be a boon.
Yeah.
But that's really what it's got going for it is that and the memory. That's pretty much everything else, and maybe the look of it. But I wouldn't say it's a bad machine. I'd say it's more of the same. But ultimately, when you look back, and this is funny, because Jack Tramiel came from Commodore and went to Atari, and both companies had sort of the same problem.
Jack Tramiel.
Well, no, it's just Atari was really the number one offender. If you go back to my chart, all the way back to 1979, all right, the 400-800, the 5200, which was a console, but it was basically an Atari computer without a keyboard, all right, 1200XL, 600XL, 800XL, all the XE series, they all were basically pretty much sort of the same. Yeah. Without stepping on toes. And so if you go that long and you've got nothing in the wings, you
don't refresh, yeah.
And so someone might say, okay, what about the ST? That's fine, but there's no reason to keep issuing these older 8-bit computers after the fact. And of course, they didn't sell that well. Now, the 130XE and the 65XE, it's been said that they were mostly slated for Europe. So you get into a whole different mindset when you're making something up for another market. And I don't know how well they sold over there, but that was the mindset. And the Atari 800XE, same thing.
Yeah.
We're going to sell these in Europe at a lower cost. I don't know if you make your money back on the R&D and stuff. I don't know. And ultimately, I don't think it worked. So, it is what it is. So the 130, it's an interesting computer to look at because I'd never fiddled with it before. But I'm glad it introduced me to Prince of Persia. That was a lot of fun. You have any final parting shots on the 130?
No, I think this is an unfortunate reoccurring late Atari misstep. Not to say that the hardware is bad or there's anything wrong with it outside of it should have never existed.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I think you nailed it. If I ever get hold of one of the XE line, we'll bring it on the show. But I don't have I do have the XEGS. That's a game system for another time.
That is.
The Brent. So that's all we got about the old 130 XE. But you know how it goes on this show, Brent. The rotation keeps rotating, and we'll be back next week with R. Sinclair, the Brent.
Yes.
It'll be October 5th. We'll be doing Old Tower. We will be back to the Atari Unlimited show October 19th. We're back around. As soon as the committee picks us a new machine, we'll be back with something else to offer up. Should be a lot of fun. I will say I enjoy diving into the Atari.
Yeah.
I will say one more thing. When it comes to Prince of Persia, apparently this can be had on cartridge.
No,
all right,
neat.
But the Atari forums were filled with people fighting over who had the right to make and sell these, and who was in trouble. So it's good to know that coming from the Amiga side of things, that the beat goes on all across the board on these various systems. That's all I got. You got anything else for tonight?
Nope.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for Atari Unlimited. We will see you next time around. And until then, make sure you play
Atari today.
Bam!